Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yep, across the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello and good morning to you. It is the Michael Dukes Show, and we are jumping into it here, hour one on this Monday, Fun Day Monday, as we like to call it around here. Not really. I mean, we don't really call that. Nobody really calls it that. But, you know, we're trying to be good about this stuff. Welcome back to the program, and thanks for coming in and joining us. About that here in the second hour this morning, and we'll go over that. In hour one, we're going to be covering a lot of what's happening around the state. Some interesting things came out, including the final decision here, I guess, on the bus driver's strike in the Mat-Su, which has finally come to a close. It looks like they finally got everything. It looks like they finally got everything squared away there, and they are going to be taking kids back to school today. That's the plan. The plan is that today is the day that they take all those kids back to school, and they're going to get back to work on it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to be talking about the closure, emergency closures. For fish, specifically for king salmon around the Cook Inlet. And what does that mean for sports fishermen, for citizens, and of course for all the businesses who depend on that down in the various areas that are affected by the closure, including much of the peninsula. And we'll see. We'll see what goes on with that here this morning as we kick things off and get things ready to rock and roll. Of course, the big news on the whole day here is that we're looking forward to seeing what happens with the Willow project, which is supposed to be hearing a decision this week. Now, whether we actually do or not is going to be another question, whether we actually see that decision this week. And of course, there's been a big push on TikTok this is the place apparently where policy is made is on TikTok. That's where new policy is made for all of America right now, apparently. But that's the big push right now is to get those. I mean, that's the point. That's the choice. So we're going to be, we'll see what the latest is on that as well. And I guess that's it here for today's show. We were working on Calvin Schregge, and that was my fault for, he apparently emailed me earlier last week before he attempted to call in, and I don't know, I missed the email. I was to search this morning and I found it. So that was my fault for not getting that in. We're seeing if we can get Calvin Schregge, Representative Calvin Schregge, on the program and on Wednesday. And we'll see what what that brings on Wednesday here this morning. So what else have we got here that we needed to get? The Iditarod started. The another roof collapsed in Anchorage. In fact, 2 more roofs collapsed in Anchorage over the weekend. 2 different businesses had their roofs cave in. And what's weird about this, I don't know if you took a look at any of the pictures or photos that they had there, but what was weird about it is that they neither one of these roofs appeared to have a tremendous amount of snow on them. But there you go. I don't know what's going on, but it's just one of those weird things. Maybe it's the ice buildup. Maybe it's whatever. The one that collapsed on Saturday only looked like it had about 3 or 4 inches of snow on the roof, but it collapsed a big chunk of the building. Kind of a crazy thing. But that's happening all over. I guarantee you that there are people all over Anchorage this morning who are scrambling to go up and look at their roofs and see what needs to be scraped off, and if it's all ice or all snow or whatever it is. So anyway, we can chat about that as well this morning as we get ready to get things going on in the big news headline cycle. Well, let's start off with the everybody in the chat room is like, TikTok, what's that? Isn't it? Yeah, it's going to be oh, and there's a big hearing in person at the Wood Center in Fairbanks tomorrow from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. on the PM 2.5 and wood smoke issue. Oh gosh. That's I got to be honest, that's a fight that I'm glad that I'm not having to personally have anymore, because that was so exhausting. The whole thing. That whole thing is just crazy. The whole idea that somehow we've got a problem with our air quality, but people are freezing to death because they can't heat their homes. It's a shocking ideal, but there you go. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the school bus drivers and what came down. It has finally ended. The strike has ended after a full month. Teamsters 959 local voted to ratify the agreement with Durham, which is the school bus company, on Sunday. Interestingly enough, the school district and the union had come to this tentative agreement on Thursday, but they waited until Sunday to actually vote on the 3-year proposal. Wondering why they had to wait. I'm just wondering why. Why did they have to wait? In a press release posted to their website on Sunday, Teamsters Local 959 said they ratified a 3-year contract with Durham School Services. The contract includes strong job protections, overall economic improvements, and tools to address safety issues at the workplace, according to the press release. School bus workers are eager to get back to work. Durham will resume their regularly scheduled routes starting this morning, Monday morning, March 6th. Bus drivers walked off the job, you'll remember, on the morning of January 31st after dropping all the kids off at school and then not saying we're not coming back to pick them up. Sorry. Safety was at the heart of the issue with the drivers with Durham, the employees calling out the bus yard for still lacking electricity, broken bus heaters, public address systems that were not installed, and required monthly safety meetings that did not occur in December and January, as just a few of the items that they were working on. The district has been struggling in the background over all this stuff, and of course, the ones that really got hit by this were the parents of the students who had to deal with all this and take their kids to school and do all that kind of stuff as well. Well, we'll see what it looks like here when it's all said and done. But apparently this morning, thumbs up. You get it all. Although why they had the thing, and I noticed that the news media, well, I guess I should say the ADN, didn't have the little tidbit. First of all, ADN said it wasn't sure when the bus service would resume. KTUU says it was going to resume today. And KTUU is the only one that announced or mentioned the fact that the union that represented the bus drivers on Thursday had arrived on that tentative agreement with the company, but waited until Sunday to vote on the 3-year proposal. Why wait? Why wouldn't you vote on the Thursday or the Friday or the Saturday to give everybody at least a little heads up and a little notice that this was coming? I mean, why would you do that? No idea. No, nothing to see here. Move along. Nothing to just move along. It's fine. You'll never notice it. Never notice it. That's what's going on there. Anyway, so good news for the Matsu. The parents don't have to scramble around to try and figure out how to get the kids to school and everything else. It's one thing if you knew that was what you were going to have to do this school season. It's one thing to be able to plan for it. It's a complete and total different thing to have to wait for the school district or for somebody to make a decision and come back to you on it. That's 100% different. 100% different. All right. The other big one, which I just saw this morning, I don't know, I apparently was living under a rock over the weekend. I didn't do much with my telephone over the weekend, but apparently the Fish and Game has announced a huge number of closures, 11 emergency closures and restrictions for King Salmon sports fishing in the Cook Inlet. And it's problematic, to say the least. This is going to have huge ramifications for this season's fishing and for potentially for businesses, the tourism industry, and your very own freezer. It's going to have some tough implications there. And so we're going to talk about that here in just a moment as well. Whew, baby. All right. We made it through the first segment on this Monday. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We return right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Hi, how are you? How are you? How you guys doing today? Yeah, I don't know. I worked on it for, I guess almost 2 hours on Friday after we had such a huge problem on Friday with the internet. And it was working perfectly. It worked perfectly all weekend. I used the computer several times for several hours on the weekend, and everything was fine. And the second that I fired it up this morning, it dropped out twice, just like boom, boom, like once right after the other. I don't know what's going on. But apparently, it's all good right now. It's all good right now. Okay. Did I dump Calvin the communist? No, that was my problem. He tried to call in that one morning, and I asked him to send me an email, not realizing that he had already sent me an email like the day before or 2 days before. And anyway, it was a hot mess. So I apologize. I've invited him to come on Wednesday morning. So we'll see what happens there. Sorry, I'm going backwards here to see what you guys have been talking about. Freezing on Facebook and YouTube, but we should be good now, right? We're all good now. Okay. No, my Starlink hasn't gone out because my Starlink is still sitting in a box downstairs. I've got to get that on. You're not on the radio at the solid squeal. Sandy, are you Sandy K. Taylor? Are you up in Fairbanks? I had a problem. I wasn't connected to the Fairbanks stations. I'm not feeling too good this morning, guys. I'm sorry. My brain is not all here. I'm trying to juggle a bunch of stuff, so I apologize. Isn't TikTok owned by China? It's owned by a Chinese company that's probably owned by the Chinese government. So I guess, yes, TikTok, I guess, is owned by China. EPA is considering dropping the standard again. If they do so, it'll probably catch the Matsu. Yeah. Somebody needs to. I forgot. Good morning, everyone. Wasn't Burham? Where was the Matsu School District? Were they monitoring the contract or no? Says David. I don't know. That was a big. That was a big question for many people. Was where is the school district in all this? I mean, is Durham fulfilling their contract or not? Apparently, Durham was having to pay some big-time fees, some big-time fines for not providing the bus service on top of all the other things. I think the new bus driver contract for the ASD employee bus drivers was the spark that ignited the strike in Matsu. Maybe. That could be for sure. The canoe for bad. So you dump the communist. That's good. He's a government. Is the answer man anyway? Well, I mean, we know sometimes that we know that we're not going to agree with every guest. That's what's going on. Sounds like someone had a case of the Mondays, said Chris. I had a case of the Mondays on Friday, Chris. I don't need another one. The national get's going to be 40 trillion. Yeah, that's great. I like how everyone is bagging on TikTok. China is spying on us with this app. Ban it. Immediately goes back to Facebook and Twitter where we're spied on locally, domestically, where the domestic spying is going on. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it, Anthony? That pretty much sums up the whole thing. All right, well, we're going to jump back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like and share, like and share. Here we go. Okay. So, welcome back to the program. Thanks for coming in. It is the Monday edition, the fun day edition of the Michael Duke Show. We got a lot of things we can talk about, but I want to get down into this discussion about what's happening with the emergency closures for King Salmon. And I'm sure there'll be some for other fishes as well. What does that mean for the state of Alaska? What does it mean for, residents and for tourists and for the commercial side of the equation as well? The ADN reports that the state has shutting down most of the summer king salmon sport fishing around the Cook Inlet amid continued declines in the strong, hard-running fish that not long ago filled freezers and fueled tourism in the state's most populated region. The ADFG on Thursday announced an unprecedented array of restrictions and closures on sport and personal use fishing from the Kenai Peninsula to the Mat-Su in a sweeping series of emergency regulations that illustrates just how bad the king salmon population crashes and the broader salmon crisis is playing out across the state. It is the most restrictive preseason orders yet after 15 years of decreasing salmon populations across the state. They said these decisions are not being made lightly. The emergency regulations go into effect in May and extend through the end of July. The list of closures include early and late king runs on the Kenai River, as well as other areas, including Anchor River, Deep Creek, and the Deshka and Susitna rivers as well. One of the Kenai River closures triggered a shutdown of the commercial set net fleet that targets sockeye salmon on the east side of the inlet, according to state biologists. It also closes a commercial drift gillnet fishery off of Kenai. There are a few areas that are still open to catch kings, including Anchorage's popular urban fishery at Sheep Creek and the Eklutna tail race off the Old Glen Highway in the Mat-Su, troll fishing out of Homer limited to one fish rather than two, and hatchery-raised kings in the Homer fishing hole and the Ninilchik and Kasilof rivers, though no wild kings can be kept. Catch and release fishing will be allowed on the Little Sioux. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. Cook Inlet kings are returning in lower numbers and smaller than before, an ongoing problem that state biologists largely attribute to ocean conditions, which is a broader category that can involve climate change leading to warmer water, as well as salmon scooped up by trawl nets and competition with other fish, including hatchery-raised ones, instead of the wild ones. The emergency closures, said veteran Andy guide Andy Couch, were exactly a shock. He said he found few salmon of any kind in the Mat-Su last season. Couch took out a few clients and then some friends on the Knik River near the tail race. All told, before the king season closed in mid-July, he said he saw two fish caught. One was a silver. This week's restrictions is going to place a heavy burden on the Cook Inlet sport fishery and fishing industry, as well as some of the commercial fleet. So this is a big deal. This is a big deal, especially to areas and to people who I know, who I have talked to over the years, that are dependent on this kind of stuff for their livelihood, and of course for other folks to go ahead and fill their freezers. This is a tough time. This is going to be an interesting. It's going to be an interesting time to see what happened. Now, they had restrictions last year, and they were similar, although not as onerous. But since they did not hit the escapement goals, that's what brought these stricter restrictions this year, according to KTUU. So you got a lot of things going on here that are going to spell some very interesting times for folks who spend a lot of their spare time fishing or filling their freezer, or for those businesses that are trying to show tourists what Alaska is all about. And even as the state, as the ADN mentions, it's going to affect certain portions of the commercial industry as well. So I just, I can't imagine that pucker factor. I just can't imagine being a business and hearing these kind of things and be going, well, there goes a chunk of our our business capital or our potential customer base for the year. Because I mean, let's face it, a lot of people come up here to fish on the Kenai or float fish down somewhere or do whatever, and now they can't do any of those things. It's gonna be a very, very interesting summer. The biggest, I think, one of the biggest culprits, and it's mentioned in the ADN article, is the draggers, the trawlers. They mention that is one of the reasons why they think that they're looking at these kind of problems with the return of the fish, is that they think that the trawlers and trawl nets could be part of the problem. Having seen those things in action, I worked as a commercial fisherman. Boy, it's been a long time now. It's been 30 years since I worked as a commercial fisherman, but when I saw those things come in and I saw how they operated, yeah, I think trawlers, especially out there by the limit, the international, the 12-mile limit, when they're scooping stuff up out there, it's everything. I mean, it is literally everything. And I think something needs to be done, to curtail some of that activity, or at least regulate it in a certain way. I'm not one for huge regulations, but when you see that kind of stuff where it just basically scrapes the bottom up and pulls everything in the world up, that is definitely not the best way to keep the fishery or the habitat and the environment. It's definitely not a good way to try and keep all that stuff, in livable condition, in livable. It's like carpet bombing an apartment complex and saying, this is a great place to live here. No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. So anyway, that's just one more big push right there. And this, again, has been, how long did they say this decline has been going on? 15 years of decreasing salmon populations. Something's got to give in that equation. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I'd love to see some changes on that. All right, what else we got? We were talking about the Willow project. Mary Peltola may have won the seat on the House Natural Resources Committee, but when it came to her begging her fellow Democrats to not throw Alaska under the bus, apparently she was not quite as influential as the seat would indicate. She hasn't been able to use that role to influence her fellow Democrats to be in favor of the one thing that most Alaskans want, which is the Willow Project. Democrats on the House committee and several influential Democratic senators like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders wrote to Biden on Friday and asking him to kill the permits for the Master Development Plan for the National Petroleum Reserve Alaska. Nearly 24 Democratic lawmakers signed the letter calling Willow ill-conceived and misguided. Because, I mean, all this work they've been doing in it, there's $1 million worth of EIS and planning and everything else. That is ill-conceived and misguided. All that work was for nothing. Just absolutely for nothing. No version of the Willow Master Plan development is consistent with your commitments to combat the climate crisis and promote environmental justice. What is environmental justice? Can anybody explain that to me? Especially as reflected in the Inflation Reduction Act, historic legislation on which we all collaborated to achieve these crucial goals. If allowed to proceed, the project would pose a significant threat to U.S. progress on climate issues. Oh man, I just don't even know what to say at this time. I mean, talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. All these things that are going on. Um, we'll speaking of China, we'll just let them do whatever. I don't know. It's Monday, and I just can't even wrap my brain around how these people, the circular logic of most of these people when it comes to all that stuff. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of wicked groupthink here that I just cannot get away from on how these people. Again, what is environmental justice? What does that mean? Let's Google it. You know what? I feel like environmental justice. Um, the definition. I want to know. I want to know what is a social move that addresses the unfair exposure of poor and marginalized communities from the harms of hazardous waste, resource extraction, and other land issues. The movement has generated hundreds of studies showing that exposure to environmental harms is inequitably distributed. Probably because the resources are, you can't choose where the resources are. You can't choose to put, and in most of those, but my brain is going to explode this morning. Probably because you can't choose where to find the resources. The resources are in a certain area. And when you extract the resources, it creates an industrial atmosphere that is not conducive to people living there. And so, yes, you're going to see them. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that's thing right there. We're gonna do the Willow Project up on the North Slope. The vast majority of the state wants it, and everybody's going to benefit. We got Native communities and everything else who want to be part of it and want to get things going. But it's environmental justice. It's going to mess up the environmental justice if we allow it to happen. Okay. All right. I mean, these people. I just cannot get away from these people. No oil, no fossil fuels. They want to make you live within a 15-minute walk or a bike from everything you need. No car or anything else. You just know nothing but, hey, your smartphone, you're allowed to have that with all the, the petroleum byproducts are in that thing and all that. That's all good. You can have your kayaks and your pleather and all your outerwear gear that from REI. That's all that stuff is fine. That's all fine. Oh, it'll be interesting to see how this rolls out. But at some point we've got to, environmental justice is right next to military intelligence in the book, right? The oxymoron of environmental. It's like jumbo shrimp. Explain that to me. Jumbo shrimp or hot water heater. I mean, who ever heard of heating hot water, right? That's who ever heard of that? I haven't. All right, we got to go. One more segment, and then we'll be joined by Robb Myers. Will be coming on board to talk to us about the fiscal future of the state of Alaska. We will continue with more in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Oh, Chris says I need to eat more salmon. It's great brain food. I'll be honest with you. I am under the weather today. I'm not feeling real great. And so I apologize. I am having a hard time connecting the words and the thoughts today. So, I mean, I I had to cut the news this morning for one of our other radio stations, and it took me, I can't tell you how many times it took me to recut it because it was almost embarrassing. I kept palavering over the words. Blah, 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 blah. It's one of those things. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, you will be regulated. Make no mistake about that. Your way of life will be made illegal and you'll be forced into a pod to eat the bugs. Or let the bugs eat you. One of the two of those things. The elites can have their jets and yachts and the rest of us are just going to, yeah. Oh. It will be interesting. It will be interesting to see. This is what Rick said. It'll be interesting to see what Peltola's net worth is in 2 years versus now. Well, if it is anything like the net worth that we've seen from other legislators and senators and representatives, she could be, in just 2 years' time, she could be a multimillionaire or even more of a multimillionaire if she's not already. I don't know what her net worth is. I haven't looked at it, but almost guaranteed that she will be a multimillionaire by the time this is all done. I'm going back here. I'm going backwards here to see what else you guys. Why the hell do they hate the middle class? Well, because we're straddling that line between the haves and the have-nots, and that's what they want. They want the new plebeian class where they can control it and rule it. The elites want that, right? Isn't that what that social divide has always been about, even going back to Victorian times, right? They've got the power to do all those things, and they hate to see anybody that would come up from the lowers to be one of them, to be one of themselves. I would rather see the national highway funds go away than regulate my burning of wood here in Fairbanks, says Gary. Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way, quite honestly, Gary. Sure, take the highway funds. Leave us alone. That's what it comes down to. Let's see. Meanwhile, we show woke military. What? Meanwhile, we show woke military recruitment videos on social media. I haven't seen those. I'll have to go out and take a look at that. They want, again, this was Kevin's comments. They want no oil, no fossil fuels. They want you to live within a 15-minute walk or bike from everything you need. No car. Worship the creation instead of the creator. Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of that in those urban planners and things when I was working on the assembly, where they had this whole plan where everybody in Fairbanks would live in 2 buildings downtown. It'd be like everybody lived in Whittier, right? Where they all live in the one building. That's what they wanted for downtown Fairbanks. We'll just build these big, tall buildings where everybody lives in one and everything is right there and you can walk to everything. That was the plan for downtown Fairbanks. And I'd ask things like, well, what happens when it's 40 below and you got, oh, well, you just wouldn't. But what happens with it? You got parking lots and we shouldn't. I mean, it was always so very pie in the sky. Every time I see that stuff, my head explodes. This is Rick's comment for the day, which I think we are all feeling right now. I just want some warm weather. Sick of this crap. More coffee. The weather this week, I just looked at it late last night before I went to bed. The weather this week is looking good. The weather is, in my area anyway, down here in Matsu in the Wasilla, 35, 37, 41, 35. That's the high temperatures for the next few days. So it's supposed to be nice and warm. We'll see what happens with that, but it's supposed to be nice and warm. They want lords and serfs, says Jeffrey Coghill. Yeah, I mean, I that's what I'm saying. I'm saying kind of the same thing, Jeffrey. I'm saying that's what it was. They had the nobility class and they had the peasants, and they were okay with that. And don't you dare any of those peasants make their way up into the nobility class. Thanks for the link, Hawk. I appreciate it. I'll have to take a look at it later. I can't click the link in the in StreamYard here. It won't allow me to do that. All right, we're coming up on it. We got one final segment before we're joined by you-know-who. Mr. Robb Myers is going to be coming on board with us. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Okay. Welcome back to the program. The Michael Duke Show, Monday edition of the program. We are in the final segment of this hour. We're going to be joined here in just a few minutes by Senator Robb Myers, who's coming on board to talk with us about the future. I guess we'd call it fiscal realities of the state. He's going to give us some economic analysis and basically talk about where is the future of the PFD. And I think that that's interesting because, again, what we're seeing here in the state of Alaska over the last, 6 or 7 years is kind of this disdain for the PFD on both sides of the equation, both the people who you would think would want to be protecting it for their constituency because their constituency, needs it more than anybody else. And I would consider that to be like the Dems. They would be, their constituency probably the most financially vulnerable, et cetera, in broad terms. I mean, I'm not talking about everyone. This is this is just in broad terms. And then also the Republicans who should believe in, who should believe in taking money out of government hands when possible. But instead, we've got whole cadres of people in the government wearing the elephant on the lapel, who just think that the usage of government funds to further their own deeds is righteous and justified. That as long as they're spent on their programs, it's all okay. And it's going to disappear. I mean, that's the problem. This whole thing is that they are going to disappear. Brad Keithley shared some numbers with me over the weekend. And we were kind of going over, he had been looking at, and Brad likes to crunch numbers down in his spare time. It's his hobby, apparently. And he starts looking at, what happens over the next few years as you look at this. And he's looking at what is the percentage of the PFD? How much are we actually going to get in the long run? And what does it actually translate to as far as, for example, the statutory PFD? What the law says that we should be getting. And it's kind of interesting. Zach Fields' $1,000 PFD, which is what he's been advocating for a while, because, of course, they know better than you how all that money should be spent. Zach Fields' $1,000 PFD comes out to about 26% of what the statutory dividend should be in fiscal year 23. If that's what we end up with, remember they all talked about that 75-25. That's what we want, that 75-25. Because as soon as conservatives moved off the whole, and they moved on to we'll do a 50-50 split, the other guys said, oh, blood in the water. Okay, so we'll take 75-25. Well, wait, that's not how negotiations work. No, that's how it works for us. And so that's what they're doing. 26% of your statutory PFD. So that means your full-on PFD should be $4,000 roughly. And they're going to be like, here's $1,000. Be happy we gave you anything. Bert Stedman's PFD at $1,300 would be about 34%. And then the actual POMV 2575 draw would actually be more than Fields's draw in the long run. I mean, it's just these numbers. Brad's going to go over these numbers with us on Tuesday, tomorrow. But as you look at these things, you just realize how screwed up our government really is. They have never seen a dollar that they didn't want to spend. They just have never seen a dollar that they did not want to spend. And here we are. Here we are today living with it. That's, and damn the private economy. It doesn't matter what happens to the private economy as long as the public economy survives and gets first crack at it and is all, as long as that happens, well, then everything else can just come and go and, we'll deal with that then. Tonight, from 6 to 8 p.m., the House Ways and Means Committee is going to be hearing bills on the PFD. They're going to be taking testimony on the PFD bill on Wednesday, not tonight. Tonight they're just hearing the bills, and we'll see where it goes from there. Yeah, and Fields argues that the $1,000 PFD follows the historical average, except that it doesn't include inflation. Except it doesn't. Fields is they just want the money. However they can fold it and spindle it and mutilate it and, toss the whole topic on its head, however they can do it to make sure that as long as they can make sure that they get the lion's share of the money to spend how they see fit, that's what they want. Because, as I said, they know better than you how to spend that money. It doesn't matter if it would, help put braces on your kid's teeth or, help you pay off that heating oil bill or put new tires on your car or even, my gosh, take a trip to Hawaii. None of that would matter because they have a plan for that money. They know better than you how that stuff should work, and you should just trust them. Trust them. Oh, if you want them to stop vulturing over the money, what state services would you realistically have them cut right now? Asks somebody in the chat room. Well, I would cut a lot of the expansion of Medicaid. I would also consolidate at least a chunk of the 54 school districts that we've got going on across the state. Oh, and I'd probably defund all the ghost positions that we have in the state of Alaska, where they are funded and yet not filled. That number, last I heard, was somewhere in the range of about 2,000 employees. So those are just a few places, Cypher, that I would probably start cutting if I was in charge. But again, I would never get elected because they don't like what I have to say. Too many people would be like, that guy's crazy. He couldn't live within our means. What do you mean with that? That's impossible. Improbable, but not impossible. I think those two things are not mutually exclusive. That is all part and parcel of it, for sure. That's where I would start if you were going to start cutting. We have to live within our means. That's the bottom line. The rest of us do. Why government should get the free pass on this, I still don't understand, especially when these people go, well, you can't run it like it's a regular budget because, because the reason we got to do all this stuff. And so you can't. Yeah. Taking a trip to Hawaii with a PFD is living within your means. Well, it depends on what is going on in your community. First of all, that money is not government's money. It's your money, Cypher. Shouldn't you decide if you want to go to Hawaii or put it in your kid's college savings account or use it to fill your heating oil tank? Shouldn't you decide what goes on with your money? I'm just asking. Or are you happy with the way the government spends the money and makes those decisions? That's the question. They live within their means and your means and my means. They live within everybody's means. That's really the truth there. That is 100% the truth. Here's the thing. That money from the dividend is statutorily, and it is ours. It is our personal money. It's our share of the mineral wealth in the state of Alaska. The state already got their full share on the pre-royalty side and on the 75% and all that other kind of stuff. And all we get is a fraction of a fraction, because they take 25% of the royalties and they put it into the permanent fund, and then it spins off some earnings, and then we get a small little portion of the earnings on a 5-year rolling average. So we get a fraction of a fraction by the time the whole thing's done, and it's never enough. Never enough. That's what they tell us. Sorry, you're going to have to sacrifice a little more. Got to pull up those bootstraps a little harder. That's kind of where we're always at, though, right? And we're seeing the same thing on the national level as well. I mean, this is not rocket science. This is the same kind of thing we're seeing. All right. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Robb Myers is our guest. Up next, right here. Don't go anywhere. Okay. So Cypher goes on to say here in the chat room, he says, this is why the concept of the PFD shouldn't exist. If it's my money, why are they managing it? Just give it to me and I'll manage it. Well, that's the thing. Up until 2016, that's exactly what happened. It went straight to you. It was a transfer. It was a shell transfer. Until politicians got their greedy little hands in there, decided to change the game and rig the system and start taking it all. Before that, it was a shell transfer. He says it will just promote endless bickering, and at the end, all of our quality of life is lower. Well, I mean, I am all for the PFD existing in its original form and how it was intended. But this is the nature of politicians. This is the nature of politics. This is the nature of government. That, it expands to consume all available resources and income. That's pretty much what happens. Oh, okay. Let's see if I see Robb Myers is in the green room. I suppose we should be ready for that. Transfers are inherently leftist and just take money from it. No, I don't mean it's a Are you being intentionally obtuse? It was a transfer from the earnings reserve account. It was a simple transfer. There was no income and outflow statement. It wasn't like they had to account for it. What I mean by a simple transfer is that the law says you shall transfer. It wasn't like you should account for and then put it up for appropriations and do all this stuff. It was a shell transfer. That's what I mean. Transfers are inherently leftist and just takes money from actual producers. That's you're missing my. I'm not feeling enough. I'm not feeling 100% enough to argue about this right now. So let me go over here to Robb Myers, who's sitting in the green room, getting ready to take over for me. We're gonna let him lead the conversation this morning. Hello, my friend. How are you doing?
Not bad. The room looks less green, more pink to me, but that's just me.
Could be. It is the pink room. That's it is my favorite color, so it's all good. All right. So are you all ready to dive into this and jump in?
Ready as I'm ever gonna be.
So this has got some deep stuff here, and I'm going to apologize in advance if I don't make all the cogent arguments and connect the dots like I normally would, because I'm operating at about 4 cylinders of 12 or 3 of 9 or 7 of 9. That's a Borg, isn't it? I mean, whatever it is, I'm operating on about half of my normal brain cells. So if I don't make all those connections that, wow you, then that's probably why. So.
Well, I mean, today's, what I sent you and what I want to talk about today, really, by and large, is stuff that we've gone over before. I'm just trying to bring it all together to get everybody looking at the big picture, so that we're not getting lost in the weeds. Sometimes you gotta study the weeds at one point, but then you also got to back up and get the 30,000 foot view and say, all right, where are we actually going here?
Exactly. All right. Well, good. Well, let's. All right, we're good. I'm sorry, good. I was just like, where am I? I've lost. What number was I looking at? Okay, we're 3 minutes out, getting ready to do this here. So Robb Myers is going to continue with us here. Cypher says, I see. My mistake. The feds have a different definition of transfers, like Medicaid chips, SNAP, SSI, and other means transfer tested, whether they're federal transfers. No, it was a you shall transfer, and maybe Rob, you can comment on this for a second, because up until 2016, it was just implied. And in fact, a lot of times it happened without the legislature even being involved. It was just a transfer from the ERA to the general fund for disbursement of dividends. That's just how it happened. It was just automatic. And then then 1 year, the legislature's like, well, we should probably be involved. We'll just sign off on the transfer. And then it slowly morphed into Bill Walker saying, no, those are general fund monies now. And it goes into the pot and everybody fights over it. Right.
I mean, it's the royalties are coming off of state land. So it goes to the state, and pre-2016, it was real straightforward. Law says 25% of the royalties go to the permanent fund, 25, and then then you've got the statutory formula that says from what the permanent fund earns, it goes straight to us to recognize that we as individuals are the collective owners of the resource, and it's not just owned by the state. And then Walker decided to get in the middle of that and say, no, you don't own it. I do. And so I get to decide, how much you're going to get out of this. And you should be grateful for whatever, leftovers you guys get from me.
Right. Exactly. And that was the thing. And that's when we ended up with that court case, which really is kind of the thing that skewered us in the long run, is the court case that said, no, they absolutely had the ability to ignore statute and ignore the law, and they could just do that, and it was their money, and yada, yada, yada. But it's not. That's not the intent. That's not what Hammond intended. That's not what the framers of the permanent fund or the dividend intended. And so here we are, working our way through that. But we'll see what happens in the long run. I mean, I'm not hopeful that this is going to revert back to a pre-2016 formula or ideation, anytime in the near future. But I've got my fingers crossed. Maybe, just maybe, we can have a Christmas miracle, and it could all happen. All right, Rob, hold the line for us, folks. We got to jump back into it. It's hour 2 of the Michael Duke Show. Robb Myers is our guest. Back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Around the world on the internet, MichaelDukesShow.com, and live around the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. It is the Michael Dukes Show, broadcasting live, brought to you by your friends over there at SatelliteWest.com, from Naknek to Ninilchik, from Menchumina to Metlakatla, from Delta to Little Diomede. It is the only place you can go to all those places and still remain in contact via email, text message, internet, phone call. Satellite West, SatelliteWest.com. That's where you go and get all the stuff that you need to stay connected. We want to say thank you to them for sponsoring the program. To find a list of their local dealers, again, go to SatelliteWest.com and get all the information. All right, hour 2 of the program today. What do we got? We've got Robb Myers, Senator Robb Myers, joining us this morning to talk about all things. Well, not all things, but some things financial, and what is the fiscal future of the state, and everything else. And he joins us at my invitation after being with us last week and providing some great stuff for us last week. So I thought we'd invite him back to talk about this and economic analysis here for all the analysis, all this stuff. All right, Rob, obviously today is not my day to talk, so I'm going to let you start off here and give us the 10,000-foot view, so to speak, on the economics of where things are going and what does this mean for things like the PFD and everything else. I mean, you know, where does this what does it mean? What is the what are the economic analysis about where we're going in the state of Alaska, and what does it mean for us citizens in the long run?
You bet. Well, good morning, Michael. So, you know, kind of following up a little bit on what we were talking about last Wednesday, talking about different visions. You know, my ultimate question and the big complaint I've had over the last 6 or 8 years, and a good chunk of why I ran for office, is, you know, we're doing all these little things to kind of get us through the next year or two, getting through this year's budget or get through next year's election cycle. And what does that mean for us, you know, going 10 or 20, 30 years down the road? What if we're going towards this new model, whether it's intentional or not? What does that do to our economy? What does that do to our state government? And we talked about a lot of this, but I just kind of want to bring all the pieces together and put them together so everybody can see the big picture here as to what's happening. So the model that we're sliding towards effectively is a government that's going to cut the PFD, and it's going to end up eventually get the majority of its money from the permanent fund. We're going to be at that stage either next year or year after, depending on market returns and what oil prices do. We've got no major cuts, no major tax increases. We still have a significant amount of government spending going to prop up the economy. And eventually you spend every dollar available, you know, so every now and then you get a big windfall and you throw a little bit of that in savings, but then you'll spend it in the year or two after that. So you might not spend it right away, but you do spend it. And the reason we're not cutting anything, going back to some stuff that we've talked about before, lots of people in this state have a vested financial interest in spending more. Very few people have a vested financial interest in spending less. So we're not going to cut. We have the difference in visions that we talked about last week that'll push us towards spending more or less. But visions are much smaller incentives for your average person than financial incentives. Visions are good for the politically motivated, like you or I. But the average person really is going to be more concerned about how they make a living. So what we're looking at is the permanent fund becoming the majority and eventually the vast majority of our state's revenue. What we're looking at right now is the permanent fund is going approximately 80% faster than the Alaska economy as a whole over the long run. Over the last year or so, I've been telling everybody 50%. Well, I screwed up. I did my math wrong. It's 80%.
Okay, Rob, first things first. I lost you there for a minute.
Oh, shoot.
So I apologize. Can we back up about 2 paragraphs and you can restart where you're going? Because we lost your connection to you there for a second. So if you'd go back and start us again, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. So what I was talking about is we're having no major cuts going on, as we talked about. I think a few weeks ago we brought that up. And it's because there's a lot of people in this state that have a vested financial interest in spending more. Very few people have a vested financial interest in spending less. So we're not going to cut. We've got a difference in visions that we talked about last week, which will push us towards spending more or less. But visions are much smaller incentives for your average person compared to financial incentives. Visions are good for the politically motivated like you or me, and probably a good chunk of the listeners of the show. But the average person is really going to be more concerned about how they make a living. So we're moving to a spot where the permanent fund becomes the majority, and fairly soon the vast majority, of the income for the state of Alaska. Over the long run, what we've seen is that the permanent fund is growing about 80% faster than the current Alaska economy. Over the last year or so, I've been telling everybody.
That's 80% faster than the Alaska economy.
80, yes. So for every dollar that the Alaska economy grows, the permanent fund is growing by about $1.80. I've been telling everybody for the last year that that is 50% faster. Well, I screwed up. I realized a few weeks ago I screwed up and I did my math wrong. It's at about 80%, not 50. So if the dividend is gone, which Brad was just telling us last week that is probably going to happen in about 10 or 12 years. If the dividend is gone, that means we can have a government that can grow 80% faster than the economy. Government's going to grow. And to be blunt, a lot of people are going to welcome it, because it gives them another chance to get more government dough.
Oh, yeah. That's part of that dependency cycle, not just on the welfare side of the equation, not what we would consider to be traditional welfare, safety net stuff, food stamps or housing or whatever, Medicaid, but also on the corporate side, because it allows them to get those big, fat, juicy government contracts, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so a lot of people make their living off of government is what it boils down to. And that's one side of it that's bad. The other side of it is that, excuse me, we are cutting off the biggest way that a resource-based economy can grow and diversify, because we're cutting off the only way that we get resource wealth into the hands of individuals. The ways that a resource economy diversifies is called linkages. And the most important linkages are financial, either through employment or profits. Or in other words, if you got an oil industry, you get that money out into the hands of individuals, either because you're employed in the oil industry or because you make the profits from the oil industry. Well, oil industry pays good salaries to the folks that are in it. The problem is that the way the oil industry works, it's a very capital intensive industry. So compared to the rest of the population, it employs a very few people. So good salaries for those that are in it, but not a whole lot of people are going to be in it.
Right.
So then it turns into, it's got to be the profits. Well, we had a way of getting the profits out into the hands of individuals through the dividend. That's what we're cutting. And effectively what we're doing is we're cutting off our own future growth moving forward.
And this is what Hammond talked about. That's what Hammond talked about with the linkages, when he is saying it has to have a direct connection to the people for them to be engaged in what's going on in the state. Otherwise, they'll just be coddled and mamby-pamby. It won't matter. He fought to have those linkages put in specifically for that reason.
This is true. And really, it doesn't even have to be that much. We're not talking about, well, you have to have some, Texas oil baron that's, made billions or something. Because I was looking at one study that was looking at the difference between natural gas growth, which is, economically, it's about the same thing as oil. It's looking at natural gas growth comparing Pennsylvania to the UK. In Pennsylvania, the ownership is mostly private. In the UK, the mineral rights are owned by the government, just like Alaska. Excuse me. And the result was that every extra dollar from gas royalties in Pennsylvania created double the economic boom that it did in the UK. And this is in spite of the fact that the average gas royalty in Pennsylvania was only about $12,000 per family. The current statutory rate, that's about 3 to 4 PFDs. So it doesn't even take that much per person or that much per family to have a huge impact on your economy and to really create that base level that you need to grow your small businesses.
Right.
And we're cutting that off at the knees. So another big problem, we've talked about this a couple times in the past, is economic growth is going to start to become a cost for government instead of a benefit. Economic growth normally means you would have more kids in school, you need more road maintenance or road construction, you need more troopers on patrol, things of this nature because the population is expanding. But usually economic activity contributes to government to pay for it through taxes. When government gets its money from outside of the economy, coming from Wall Street instead, economic activity becomes a cost rather than a benefit. We need to spend money on all of this stuff, on kids in school, rather than, we're reaping money here from this economic activity.
Right. We're taking the money that's coming from the people directly and then basically planning what's best for it. Instead, we've got all the money and now we could come up with a pie in the sky ideas for what works.
Right. Exactly. And, so you go up to Fairbanks and, one thing that's being talked about a fair amount is the trucking plan coming out of Mancho, that small mine down near Toke that then's going to get, the ore is going to get trucked up to Fort Knox. And one argument being used against it in Fairbanks is that it's going to cost more in road maintenance than it'll bring into the state. Now, personally, from what I've seen in the numbers, I don't think that's accurate. But to me, it's scary that we're just starting to think that way because we're going to try to stop economic development because it costs the state more than it's going to make. This is very backwards here. We want to be encouraging economic development, and instead, our financial system for the state is going to be set up to stop economic development instead of encourage it.
Right. Which again is that what we talked about in the past is that divide between the public and the private economy. When they're disconnected, that changes the whole dynamic of government when it's disconnected from the private economy in that way as a source of revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then as the private economy starts to wither, the question is whether the state is going to intervene because of more political pressures to do something, or if it'll intervene less because of the cost. Either way, the purely private economy will get either discouraged or crowded out, one way or another. So we're going to end up with a withering private economy and a growing public economy. And
I think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just saying that just looking at resource development, we've been a resource development state since territorial days and before, and we're going to continue to be that for a while. The problem is that as government starts to get its money from outside of the state, government's going to be able to regulate businesses out of existence because they won't need the income generated from them.
Right.
That's bad for everybody, but especially for resource development. And that got missed last year during the CONCON debate. The Alaska Miners Association actually came out against the CONCON because they were worried that changes to the Constitution could regulate them out of existence. I'm worried that our new financial structure is actually going to cause the state and the citizenry who don't work in resource development to stop caring and allow those regulatory initiatives and others to pass, regulating them out of existence piecemeal instead of in one fell swoop.
Well, because it disincentivizes the government from having to care about what happens in the private economy. If there's more regulation, they're okay with it. That's fine because it means more power for them, more monies for the regulatory agencies, more bureaucracy, and all these other things because they're not dependent on that same industry to help provide and pay the bills in the state. That's coming from somewhere else. So in fact, not only does it disincentivize that, it actually encourages higher regulatory environments and higher restrictions because again, and then it justifies their ability to do what they do, the personnel and the bureaucracy and everything else. It's definitely not it's kind of the perfect storm in the long run of all those things as well. Robb Myers, hold the line for us for just a minute. Folks, we will continue the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Robb Myers is our guest. We'll continue talking about the fiscal state of the state and where do we go from here with a bigger, deeper view, bigger view, a bigger whatever. It's going to be a view of what's happening. That's all directly ahead. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Robb Myers is our guest. Sorry about that, Rob. Just as you got started to get wound up in your thing, my internet was fine, but the StreamYard, the service that we use for the video conferencing, it just crashed. It locked up. Apparently, everybody could still hear you in the chat room, but nobody else could hear you, and it took me a while to get you back up on the line. So I apologize for that, making you repeat yourself. But
it
there you
seems
go.
to be a thing these days. I was on a video call on Thursday and it kept cutting out on me too. So
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like I said, I spent after the total poo parade that was the show on Friday, where the internet just kept, just repeatedly dropping out on the show. Luckily, not on the radio side. I was able to stay connected on the radio side, so it was my streaming PC that was causing the problem. After spending about 2 hours trying to figure it all out, I thought it was solved, and then, of course, 12 seconds into the show this morning, it started dropping, and it worked fine all weekend, but now it's been stable since. So maybe, fingers crossed, who knows? I just don't even know at this point. But I think we can't overstate in all your analysis of what's going on and everything else. It can't be overstated the downside to disconnecting government from the private economy. It cannot be overstated how much of a problem that is and is going to be, and the unintended consequences. It may sound great on paper that, we won't have to go to the people to do this, and we won't have to do this, and we won't have to do that. But it's the unintended consequences that just kills it outshines any positive on this. It outshines it by a mile.
And I've been doing a lot of reading the last couple of years about oil-based economies, which ours obviously is, and oil-based governments. And, what it rolls down to, and not just oil, but kind of resources in general, is if you get this big cash cow that the government is able to capture, effectively that industry becomes the dominant factor in your economy, and the rest of the economy withers. And, even in developed economies, like, one big example that's been used is the Netherlands. The Netherlands developed a bunch of natural gas in the 60s, and it had some nasty effects on the economy. It's bad enough that it got named after them. It's called Dutch disease. And the way you fix it ultimately is you have to keep your spending under control, and you have to get the money out of the hands of the government into the hands of individuals, so that individuals can grow and diversify and make their own decisions. And we're going the exact opposite route. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, if having a oil dominated economy means everything flounders except for oil, what happens when your government revenue isn't even coming from oil? It's coming from the stock market. Well, then everything except the stock market's going to flounder. And you have to sit back and look at this stuff and stop saying, oh, well, we just need to fix it for this year. Oh, I've got re-election this year, so I can't do anything crazy. No, we got to stand back and actually examine where this is taking us.
Well, and that's the thing. It would require some self-analysis, which is definitely not the strong suit, I would think, of those who've been in power in the state for many years. It's always the crisis of the next election. That's what we're slaves to. There is no long-term thinking. It is, how do we get it beyond this 2-year cycle? And if I do it this year, do I still have 2 or 3 years to wait for the people to forget about it so they can reelect me again? I'll do something on the first year and then coast for the last 3 years so that they still think I'm a good guy, and then they'll reelect me and I can do something else here in another year. It's crazy.
It is, it's the nature of government, and it's, we forget, I think, sometimes that your average government, average elected official has different incentives than your average business owner. Your average business owner is forced to think 5, 10, 20 years down the road. Your average elected official is forced to think 2 to 4 years down the road. There's a few around here that I've talked to that can buck that trend. But I'm not blaming anybody. It's just the nature of the business. It encourages you to think a certain way.
Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Yep. The show. Welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska. This your favorite radio station and or FM translator. We are continuing now with Robb Myers, who is our guest, giving us a deeper fiscal look at where things are going and just pointing out some things that are, I'm still stuck on the whole fact that the permanent fund grew 80% faster than the Alaska economy. And now they're talking about utilizing the permanent fund as the sole source of income for government. Just think about that. Your government growing at, 50 to 80% faster than the private economy. What does that look like in 10 years? What does that look like if you let the government grow to that point and beyond? It's absolutely crazy. When we left off, Rob, you were talking about government being able to regulate business out of existence because, well, they don't need the businesses to generate income anymore for them because they're getting it they're getting it from the permanent fund. They don't need to worry about that. And I talked about how that actually increases the promulgation of regulation because that justifies the existence of the bureaucracies that are given that responsibility. And you're talking about this is especially bad for different industries and things like that, like resource development.
Right. When we talk to the resource development guys down here in Juneau, one thing that they bring up is that every couple of years they have to fight a ballot initiative of some kind that's targeting oil or targeting mining or something of this nature, and they fight them down pretty much every time. But it costs them a lot of time and money to do that, and obviously they're not fans of that. But the reason that we vote them down, I think, is because most people in this state realize that that's where their bread and butter comes from. Is we get the money from the oil, we get the employment from mining, things like this. We recognize that this is what we do. But if we get to a place where the government doesn't have to get the money from the oil, or you don't have to be employed in one of these sectors because you can get a government job or a government contract job, then all of a sudden people don't care about that sort of stuff anymore. And one or two of those initiatives are going to start to pass. And that's not counting, what could happen just here in the halls of Juneau as well, because the state will no longer have to bear the cost directly of a shrinking private economy because we get our money from elsewhere.
Right. And so instead of a one fell swoop, it then becomes the piecemeal chip at every industry that we're talking about that could it dismantles the potential fund of revenue for the state government in the long run, leaving us basically dependent on the one. It's a self-reinforcing feedback loop, right? They take more money and it eliminates other competitors or other ways to get money. And so we're more and more dependent on that permanent fund issue, the permanent fund solution in the long run.
Right. And let's keep in mind that permanent fund solution is not exactly a great solution when you're talking about a source of revenue anyway. It's still a volatile source. The 5-year average of the POMV is better than oil. It would have been nice to have a 5-year average of oil, but the stock market still has some volatile swings. Anybody watching the value of the permanent fund over the last year can see that. From 83 billion as of about a year and a half ago, down to about 70 billion at its low point. Now I think we're about to 77.5 as of Friday. I haven't seen it yet this morning. And so we're still going to be vulnerable to stock market downturns, which will cause a shortage of revenue for the operating budget. So we're going to depend on this big source of money coming in, and we're still going to run out of money because we go back to spending it all. So we're going down the path of spending the entire dividend. There's going to be no shock absorber left. And then we'll get taxes, either on top of an already declining oil industry or a broad-based tax, or maybe both. Or maybe there'll be a push to start to violate the POMV, because remember that's only in statute. There's
Right.
no constitutional backing to that, so we can
Right.
violate that too.
Right, because they're going to look at it and go, well, we need to take the PFD for this, for that. And after 3 or 4 years of that, it's no longer $1,000 PFD. Now we're talking about into the hundreds or maybe nothing. And there's nothing to indicate that would quell their appetite for spending. I can already see the argument. I've already seen some of the people, Zach Fields and others, have made this argument, and they keep saying, well, other states tax, we don't. Other states do this, we get a free ride. I've seen that. Oh, we're not paying our own way. We need to. So what'll happen is they'll consume all of the money, all of the PFD, and then they'll come back to us and say, well, Alaskans, you're just not paying your fare. You're just not paying your way. We need to have a tax. And so there will be even more money taken out of the economy at that point, again, with no ramifications because it is not connected to the economy in any way.
Right. And Brad was just giving us the analysis last week that we're looking at the PFD being gone in approximately a dozen years. And that's before any of the new spending that we're already talking about this year on a higher BSA, defined benefits, excuse me, or anything else that people are talking about. So one big message I want to get out to everybody is if your goal is to give up the PFD in order to avoid taxes, you will still get taxes. It's just a question of when.
Well, and that's saying that the PFD cut is not a tax, right? If you're giving the PFD cut ups to avoid taxes, you're being taxed already. It's a tax already. I mean, that's the thing that nobody really wants to acknowledge.
Right. Best case scenario, you are delaying the inevitable because we're not fixing the underlying problem. And one thing that we've talked about as a possible fix to it is a spending cap. And I'm all in favor of a spending cap. I introduced one. But a spending cap is not going to work by itself because it doesn't create an incentive to spend less. We're likely going to find ways either to get around it or ultimately there could be a push to repeal it. We're not going to change things until we have a reason for the vast majority of Alaskans to call their legislators and ask for a budget cut instead of calling their legislators and asking for a budget increase. The vast majority of people that come in through my office are asking for a budget increase. A significant portion of the emails that I get, even though I live in a very conservative district, a significant portion of the emails I get are asking for a budget increase of one shape or another. And I don't get the emails that say, cut the budget. I don't get those emails. I don't get those phone calls. I don't get those people coming through my office because your average Alaskan doesn't have an incentive. Your average Alaskan has an incentive to ask for more money because that is how they get that piece of the oil revenue or the permanent fund earnings or what have you through government spending in some way, shape, or form. And until we have a financial incentive for your average Alaskan to want less government spending instead of more government spending, the situation is not going to change.
Well, and look, I can guarantee you, if you tell the chat room that there is no political will to cut, people, start to lose their minds because we wanted a cut. We've wanted this for a long time. We've wanted all the, but what you're saying is that even from one of the most conservative districts in the state, you're still getting a continuous call for more spending. That's part of the problem. I mean, that's the thing. Have we just not been doing a good enough job as the pro-cut side of the equation, getting the word out? Have we just not done a good enough job of getting legislators' attention to do these things? Is that part of the issue here?
It's not a question of getting the word out. It's a question of what do people have an incentive to do? When a significant portion of this state is making their living off of government spending, they have a significant reason to call us and say, spend more. When the majority of the state doesn't pay for government directly, they don't have an incentive to call us and say, spend less. Really, the only ones that call us and say, spend less are the oil industry and to some extent the mining industry and one or two others that actually give us, actual honest to goodness taxes because they realize that that's their tax bill. The oil industry has been telling us for decades that they want a stable fiscal structure. And that's part of the reason that they've gone to Texas and New Mexico and North Dakota and stuff is because they have stable fiscal structures down there. And they know that when the state decides to spend more, that they're not the ones that are going to be directly in the crosshairs, because there's so many other people down there that are going to call their legislators and say, knock it off. Whereas up here, they don't have that. They don't have that kind of backing. And so they are kind of sitting here going, well, what's the legislature going to do this year? What are they going to do next year? While the average Alaskan calls and says, spend more.
Right. So, I mean, I guess we'll get into this in the final segment as to what the solutions are to this, but I can already see one solution on this is that we need to double down and be more vocal about where we're going and what we need to be doing and letting people know. But also, your point is that we need that connectivity between the linkage between the private economy and the public economy so that we could see what it's costing us. So if somebody calls up and says, I want more money for my whoozy what's it, they know that money is then coming out of their pocket as well as everybody else's, instead of out of this amorphous, disconnected pot of money somewhere down the road, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a guy over at UAA, guy named Alexander James. He's an economist over there, and he did an interesting paper a few years ago. He said, what happens in terms of corruption if you've got money coming out of oil or money coming off of a tax. And he says the funny thing is, you start looking at it, people are less bothered by corruption when you have money coming out of oil compared to money coming out of a tax. Because if your corruption comes out of a tax, then it's, hey, you just stole my money. If it's corruption that's coming off of oil, it's, well, it was a windfall. I really wasn't going to get any anyway, so I'm really not that worried about it.
Right.
And it's not like Alaska's had corruption issues in the past. We're squeaky clean around here.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. If it's not my money, I don't really care if you've stolen it or not. If it is my money, I'm outraged, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't have enough people that are outraged because of where the money is coming from.
Right. And a spending cap, as you just mentioned, is great, except for most of the suggestions for spending caps are statutory in nature, which means there's, again, what's a statute? The legislature just doesn't care. What's a statute? I mean, is that something that we just speed bump over? And the other types of spending caps, the constitutional spending caps, they're not getting really any traction at all. Because, again, why would the lunatics want to give the keys to the asylum back, right? I mean, they're in charge. They're large and in charge. Why would they want to give those away?
Or even if we did pass one, the legislature has shown an immense talent in the last 40 odd years for getting around fiscal constraints in the Constitution. Whether you want to talk about the reverse sweep or a couple of other things, we've got this amazing talent around here for finding loopholes in the Constitution and exploiting them. And I think we would find all the loopholes in a spending cap as well. We would find all of the loopholes in just the same way we found all the loopholes in lots of other provisions in the Constitution. And ultimately, if the incentive is still, I make my money off of government and this spending cap is getting in my way, you get enough of your neighbors together that also make their money off of government, and eventually there's going to be a push to repeal it.
Right. We're talking with Robb Myers, our guest. We're actually up against the next break, so we're going to continue with him here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Final thoughts here and potential solutions to this economic problem. Senator Robb Myers is our guest. The Michael Duke Show continues. Your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
So Rob, you answered it partially. I think it was Cypher earlier who said, what's your thoughts on the Dutch disease? And I was like, the Dutch disease, and that was your commentary on the Netherlands, right, and their dependency on oil and gas and what they were doing there. That's part of the problem there. Let me actually unmute you there, Mop. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, the Dutch found out that if you have an oil or gas development show up that kind of dwarfs the size of the rest of the economy, the issue becomes that it draws in all of the investment dollars, it draws over all of the employment, and kind of the rest of your economy starts to wither. And the government kind of, taking back the looking at the overall view says, oh, we're making so much money on this oil that they're not really notice that the rest of the economy is kind of slowly dying over here. And so they don't really do anything about it. And then it's the nature of oil and gas fields. They slowly dwindle down. And then it kind of just reveals what's been happening for the last 20, 30 years underneath. And then you go, oh no, how did we get in this situation? Well, we got in this situation because you had one big natural resource kind of overwhelm everything. And what I'm worried about is we're going to be in a place where this one big stock market is going to overwhelm everything from the state's perspective. And it's just going to make everything else dwindle.
Cypher goes on to say, and actually I started this comment because I think some of us in the chat room are feeling this morning. So what are you implying? We should just all move out to the lower 48 eventually because the government's going to destroy the private sector. I think that's the danger, is that the government is going to destroy the private sector. But is your argument that we should just all pull the plug now, pull the ripcord, and get out while the getting's good?
I mean, that if we don't arrest this situation, then that's probably what's going to happen. Is the majority of us are going to leave, because you're going to have federal jobs, you're going to have state jobs, you're going to have some local government jobs, you're going to have a service sector, that serves all those people, because hey, you got a government job and a state job, you still want to go out to eat, you still need somebody to fix your car, things like this. So you're going to have a small service sector that serves those other the guys in those government jobs. But really, by and large, that's going to be what we have left for a private economy here. So my goal is not to say this is what has to happen. My goal is to say, here's the direction that we're currently going. We need to change direction, and we need to be able to accept some drastic changes. We're way past the point where just kind of nipping and tucking around the edge is going to fix anything here. And we have to be able to accept some very, very different premises of how a government operates compared to what we have done up to this point in time.
I think that's it right there. We will be left with basically a government economy. Everything else will just be secondary to that, and there won't be much left if we don't do it. And as you said, everybody's going to have to. There's going to have to be some sacrifice here. We saw what the governor tried to do in 2018 when he put his budget out, and everybody lost their ever-loving mind because, oh my God, you mean I would have to cut? You mean my special my special project, my special pet thing would lose money? We couldn't possibly do that. But in the long-term fiscal solution is everybody's going to have to lose a little bit to be able to make that happen.
Right. And what the governor tried to do in 2019 was good, and it was eye-opening for me, and I think for a lot of other people, because it kind of it makes us all realize how entrenched so many of these interests are in getting their government paycheck. Because if you start to cut and you start to do the right thing to right the ship, you haven't yet changed the incentive towards more spending. We still have to change that underlying incentive to get it so that there's an incentive towards less spending. And until that happens, anybody that tries what the governor tried in 2019 is going to run into the same issue, and you're going to have a veto override or something else along those lines. And it's going to be, it's going to be tilting at windmills until you change that underlying incentive.
That's true, because instead, as we said before, I mean, you're treating the symptoms instead of the disease. You're just, you're putting a cold compress on it and giving you 2 aspirin and saying, walk off that fractured bone, because, that's where we're at. If we have to find a way to disincentivize that. And I'm not sure exactly what the solution is to that. I'm sure you probably have some solutions from your position there, seeing what it's like behind the scenes and all the sausage making. And we'll give you a chance to lay that out for us here in the final segment. Robb Myers is our guest. If you're watching us on YouTube, I hope you have hit the subscribe button, and then it turns into a bell and you ring the bell to get all the notifications. If you haven't done that, if you haven't gone out to our YouTube page yet, would you please? I need 1,000 subscribers. I'm not even to 500 yet, but I need 1,000 subscribers to make it happen. So if you could be part of it, that'd be great. All right, here we go. Jumping back into it. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do it. All right, welcome back. Robb Myers is our guest. Final segment of the show this morning. We were talking during the break about, we have to find a way to disincentivize the spending, to take that away, to make it not palatable to be going after every dollar available. Robb, you've got some goals that you've laid out, and I'm hoping that you'll give us a way that we can make that happen. But you've also got some goals laid out and the things that can be done to maybe attempt to fix this situation. So I'll give the floor over to you, and you can hit us with a few of these things here on the way out the door.
Yeah, you bet. So the ultimate goals that we have to order to fix this situation, it looks a heck of a lot like the fiscal policy working group from a year and a half ago. Okay. So in no particular order, these are the things that have to happen. Protect the PFD to, one, get the money out of the hands of government, and two, provide the foundation for growing that private economy. Next up, we have to put in a spending cap to keep the state from expanding just because it has more money. Okay. If you're going to expand, you have to have a good reason to do so. So if your economy is expanding and your government needs to expand to provide the services to a growing population, I can understand that. And that is one of the reasons that we craft the spending cap to tie it to the economy. Okay. You have to give the state an economic incentive to care about the private economy, and the spending cap is part of that. You also have to give the people a financial incentive to care about lower state spending, because we already have too many financial incentives for the people to care about more state spending. So right. What does, I want people to really start thinking about, what does a financial incentive to the average Alaskan to care about less state spending look like? What does a financial incentive to the state to care about a healthy private sector look like? Okay.
Right. And you mentioned the spending cap, and you just think, if we had a viable spending cap in place throughout the early 2010s, what would it have looked like? I mean, first of all, we wouldn't have expended $15 billion out of our savings account, out of the CBR. We wouldn't have drained that account down if we'd looked at it. We would have money for today. If we had a spending cap in place, it would not, the size of government would not have grown to the point that it is today. And it may have been impossible for things like the expanded Medicaid to be put in place, because we couldn't expend the monies to fund that kind of stuff. So if we had, that in and of itself would have been a big milestone to have an actual spending cap. So, it's all part and parcel. You can't just do one, but you're right. We have to find a way to disincentivize government's need or desire for spending, and to re-incentivize people to be engaged in it. And right now, they're not.
Right. If we'd had a viable spending cap during that boom from 06 to 14, roughly, we wouldn't have spent $15 billion out of savings. We actually would have saved $15 billion. We would have had $15 billion more in savings. And, right. If we'd had that in place. So, ultimately, once we can have the state realizing that it can't just spend money because it has it, and actually has to care about the economy, and once we have people wanting the state to spend less, and they can't just make a living off the state, all of a sudden the non-oil, non-government economy starts to become a whole lot more important. Then at that point, we'll be able to make some progress on doing things like removing regulation, like professional licensing, making educational investments that actually improve outcomes instead of just congratulating ourselves on how much we care about education because of our focus on inputs, and making infrastructure investments that will actually help the economy grow instead of just providing construction jobs for a summer or two.
Right. I mean, make an actual difference in those things, and have the accountability on, our second largest budget item, which is education, actually have some accountability instead of just endlessly throwing more money at it and saying, look at what a good job we did. Look at all that money we threw at it. I mean, even though we're still 49th in the, in the education, we did a great job, didn't we? I mean, that's what we're looking at right now.
Right, because when you have a government that's focused on how much money is coming in, it's going to focus on how much money it is spending on education. When you have a government that's actually focused on making sure the economy works, then you're going to have a government that's actually focused on making sure that kids are actually getting educated and they're going to care about outcomes.
Right. And actually, can actually work in the workforce when it's all said and done, when the thing ends. So
Right.
what's the end result here, Robert? Where are we at?
So the end result, if we can get all of this to happen, the end result is going to be a growing private economy and stable or shrinking government. And the government it necessarily won't even necessarily be shrinking in terms of absolute dollar value, because if the economy is growing, the government can stay the same absolute size, but it's going to be shrinking as a percentage, which is the goal, at least in my opinion. So once a private economy becomes more important, it's likely going to lead to a more conservative politics as well, because then you're going to have more people that are going to care more about the private economy instead of caring about getting their slice of that government dough, or that oil dough, or that
Right.
stock market dough, or however you want to phrase that. And this is how we crack the chicken and egg problem that we've had in this state for decades, of having a liberal government that creates a liberal economy and vice versa.
Well, and I think I have talked about that in the past, that, I mean, Alaska is considered by many to be a red state, and we're shocked when all these blue politics come out of it. But it's because historically we're not really a blue. I mean, we've really been a Democratic state from the very beginning. I mean, we may have changed the skin, but underneath you prick us and it still bleeds blue, right?
Right. We're pretty conservative socially in this state, but if you're going to have a state where the government is a significant portion of the economy, the government props up a significant portion of the economy, well, then that's going to lead towards more blue politics than red politics. And it doesn't matter, what the letter at the end of the guys in charge are. If their job is to keep the government economy going, because that's what the economy is, then that's blue politics, not red politics.
So, Rob, we're down to the last 4 minutes here or so of the broadcast for today. So now that you've beaten us down mercilessly with all these hard truths, my God, it was already Monday, and then we brought Rob on to give us all the good news, as one of the previous callers, or one of the previous folks in the chat room said. What are you saying? Should we just all move out to the lower 48 because government's going to destroy the private sector? Well, if we don't do something, something's got to happen. So what are your solutions, Rob? What in the end, what do we need to do? I mean, how do we change this dependency cycle? How do we incentivize government to spend less? How do we incentivize the public to want less government spending? What's the solution?
As the saying goes, the first step is admitting you have a problem, right? So
yeah. We have a problem. Okay, I'll admit it. We have a problem. Now you just got to get everybody else to agree with me.
Right, exactly. And ultimately, it has to be, we have to give your average Alaskan a financial incentive to want less state spending. And, it has to cut into their wallets. If it doesn't cut into your average Alaskan's wallet, they don't have a reason to call Juneau and say, knock it off. We have to find a way that most Alaskans have their wallets getting cut into in a meaningful way, because as Brad has brought up multiple times, you cut the PFD, that cuts into people's wallets, but it cuts into the wallets of the people who are the least politically active and the people that are scraping to get by and have the least amount of time available in their lives to try to get involved in politics and call their legislators, show up at testimony, things like that. We have to have a way that all Alaskans across the board have a financial incentive to tell government to knock it off. Otherwise, all we're doing really, and I brought this up a couple of times, is with cutting the PFD, what we have done is we have pitted the people with lobbyists against the people without lobbyists. And you can tell me where that's going to end. We have to have the majority of the vast majority of citizens across the income spectrum have a cut in their wallet that is going to make them pay attention and say, y'all need to knock it off down there in Juneau.
Right. Well, I'll be honest with you, Rob. I thought when they first cut the PFD, I thought the people were going to stand up. I really did. I thought the people were going to be outraged. I mean, look, they've touched the third rail of politics, which is what the PFD had been up until that point, and it's going to be bad. I mean, I watched the entire crowd at the Iron Dog start that year boo the governor of the state of Alaska as he stood up on the stage. I thought, well, this is it. They're gonna be, and no, nothing happened. It was just kind of crickets. Nothing really went on.
I wouldn't quite say nothing, because I think what has happened is cutting the PFD was enough to throw us into chaos. It wasn't enough to push us in a different direction yet, but it was at least enough to put a brake on the direction that we were going. So it's at least slowed us down. It's put us into chaos. But until we've got enough of a push behind us to go a different direction, we're still going to go this same direction. And, the rest of the folks that are actually behind this, that actually wanted to go this direction, can just sit here and try to wait us out.
So what is the solution? Les, we got a minute here. So what is the solution to how do you get them engaged? Is it a tax? Is it something else? I mean, how do you get them fiscally motivated to be part of it?
Well, I've been talking to people about a tax. Is that a way to go? Because that is cutting into your average, into everybody's pocketbook, that says now you're going to have to care about what government's doing, because they're going to spend your money directly, whether you're making $10,000 a year or $100,000 a year or $1 million a year. And I would love to have somebody give me a way to do it otherwise. But I really think that we're heading that direction. If we don't have a broad-based tax that everybody gives everybody a reason to care about, I don't think we're going to cut the budget in the long run. I don't think we're going to arrest this slide towards a growing government economy and a shrinking private economy.
Robb Myers, our guest, The Michael Duke Show. Folks, we're out of time. We will see you tomorrow. Brad Keithley, Chris Story. Well, now you did it. You told everybody that might be the only solution. I mean, I can't see any other way to get people involved at this point. I don't want it. I don't want anything like it. But as you say, if you're seeing the most of the content that's coming to you from your constituency, which is a conservative constituency, is asking for more money, how else does this even work? I have never once called my legislator and said, I want you to spend more government money on one thing. I've told them a lot that I don't want them to spend as much government money. I can't even imagine the mindset of people coming in and say, you got to fund this project. I don't know, Rob. I'm at that point where I just don't understand. How are we going to fix this?
Right. You're right. And, I've noticed an interesting pattern going around talking to my colleagues, especially the freshmen this year. And I've noticed an interesting pattern between the guys that have served in local government first before coming to the state, and the folks that jumped just straight to state government, which frankly is what I did. Because the guys that served in local government, they kind of get this intuitively, because every year they have guys showing up down at the city council or the borough assembly or what have you that says, cut my property taxes. I don't want to pay more property taxes. Stop your spending, because I don't want to pay for it out of my property taxes, or I don't want to pay for it out of a sales tax, which is some locations of the state too. You don't have that countervailing opinion here in Juneau, because you don't have people saying, stop spending my money. So until you get that, I don't see how else we get out of this, kind of death spiral that we're in.
That's depressing. Okay. I mean, I mean,
No
I'm
more
with
Myers
you.
Mondays. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, Myers Monday. No more Myers Monday. It's morbid. It's morbid Myers Monday now. I agree with you, Rob, that it's the only thing that I can see on the table that would affect people directly. And I don't want it to be punitive, but I want it to make a difference, right? I want it to actually move that needle. And that's what we're having a problem with. I know you're busy. You got stuff going on. I hear your phone ringing. Robb Myers, any final thoughts before we let you go?
Well, I guess the final thought is there is a way out of this. There is a way out of this. There's a way out that supports what we as conservatives want, which is a smaller government and a stronger private sector. But what I'm concerned about is that we came up with these ideas 40, 50 years ago that says this is what a conservative means. And those policies were created in a certain period of time and a certain set of circumstances. And times have changed and circumstances have changed. And we've held on to those policies and said, this is what it means to be a conservative. And now those policies are leading us down a different road. We need our principles to stay the same, but we have to be willing to accept different policies to get us there because we're in a different situation now. And we have to be able to think outside the box and accept that certain things that we do, that we have been doing for a long time, aren't going to work anymore. And it's time to change how we're thinking and what we're doing.
We got to adapt. We got to overcome. We got to improvise. That's what we got to do. Robb Myers, thank you, my friend. It's good to talk with you. Appreciate you coming on board.
You bet. Good to see you, Michael. We'll catch you later.
Too, sir. Thank you so much. Folks, we are out of time. We got more coming up tomorrow on the big radio broadcast. We're going to be joined by Brad Keithley, Chris Stewart. Till then, be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.